question that I've been asking myself a lot recently is, will I always have complex PTSD? And the answer, it turns out, is complicated. Here's the thing, I have been feeling a lot better recently.
I'm getting better!
No, you're not. You'll be stone dead in a moment.
I've been coping a lot better. It's been a while since I've had that sword of Damocles feeling that used to be with me constantly. I actually sort of feel like if and when the next bad thing happens in my life, I'll be able to just deal with it, mostly. Even writing that when I was writing the script and now saying it out loud felt a bit like a subtle trigger. Like just imagining a positive outcome would be tempting fate to go ahead and try me. The book Overcoming Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder by Larry Smith, which my therapist recommended I read at the start of treatment, says this about curing PTSD. In many cases of uncomplicated PTSD of recent origin, complete elimination of all PTSD symptoms within 15 sessions can and should be expected. In other cases, complete elimination of the person's PTSD symptoms may not be realistic. He goes on to say that a more reasonable goal might be to return to a level of functioning that existed prior to an increase in symptoms caused by a life crisis. Or in the case of complex PTSD, which is rooted in multiple traumatic experiences or very young traumatic experiences, it might just be to stop the PTSD from getting worse and to introduce some problem-solving skills and ways to deal with stressors. I can tell you that my complex PTSD was not completely resolved after 15 sessions of therapy. After 2 years of therapy, starting with weekly sessions and then moving to bi-weekly and now monthly, I'd say that Smith's more feasible goals are closer to my current reality. As in his example scenario, my PTSD diagnosis came in the wake of a life crisis. Actually, 3 crises. Our relocation to California, the COVID-19 pandemic, and my husband's cancer diagnosis. The first 2 events each intensified my symptoms, and the cancer just broke them wide open. There are several well-researched treatments for PTSD and complex PTSD, but the one I did was a cognitive behavioral approach that was augmented with a few other techniques as my therapist saw fit. It started with several months of just establishing a trusting relationship and learning to recognize both my actual feelings and what it felt like to be triggered and what caused those triggers before we moved on to learning more coping skills and then gradually practicing easing up on avoidance, which was previously my only coping strategy, and substituting a new, healthier skill set of things like journaling and exercising and meditating. At this point, I would say I'm not quite back to where I was 5 years ago, before life started throwing all of these curveballs. But I'm close, and I'm getting closer. What's better is that I'm doing that with so much greater awareness and a better set of tools than I had previously. That being said, I am pretty terrified of what the next thing will be because I don't 100% trust those new tools. And I'm really scared of the effect on me of whatever thing comes next, especially now that I'm getting out of the habit of burying my emotions, and I kind of have no choice but to feel them. I'm trying to imagine what it would feel like to just not have PTSD. It's almost impossible to wrap my head around because the trauma responses that I have were wired into my brain starting when I was 5 or 6 years old. And I think for me, being cured would be to find myself just easily and instinctively using healthy coping mechanisms without having to make a concerted effort at it like I do now. It would mean not feeling the fight or flight reaction rise up in my body unless I am truly in a life or death situation. And it would mean feeling welcome and loved in my own body and mind. And having all of the energy that I currently spend on actively managing all of the things going on in my brain back and available for just other things. I spent 45 years tracing and retracing the patterns of complex PTSD into a much more malleable brain than the one I have now at 50 years old. I think it's likely I'll always have to actively manage my thought patterns and my emotional regulation. Is knowing how to do that the same as being cured? It's not. It's not, but I like to imagine myself as a graph of a calculus function or the stats of one of my YouTube videos as it approaches its limit. Even if I never reach the holy grail of being cured, I'll always be in a state of getting infinitely closer. Although in reality, instead of going like this, the graph looks more like this with lots of ups and downs. After 2 years of therapy, my takeaway is simply that incurable isn't the same thing as hopeless. And I hope, after hearing me talk a little bit about my experience, that that's your takeaway too. For now, I am wishing you love and joy and all of those good things, and I can't wait to talk to you again.